Welcome again. Today's webinar is presented by SAMHSA Game Center with the support of SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Again, today we are presenting on supporting veterans in the criminal justice system, Part 1, Enhancing Services in Treatment Court. Our presenters today are Sean Clark, Dr. Catherine Andrade, and Brian Kurtz, and I'll introduce them shortly. I'm Dr. Melissa Stein, a Senior Research Associate with Policy Research Associates at SAMHSA Game Center. I go by pronouns she, her, and I'm joining from Charlotte, North Carolina. And you should see a chat box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to join us there and share where you're joining from in terms of location and what organization you're joining from. And now I have just a few more housekeeping items to review. First, the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We do have a Q&A pod towards the bottom of your screen. We welcome you to submit your questions at any point throughout the presentations. And at the end of the presentations, we will address as many questions as time permits. We also have a couple of polls throughout this event. You should have just seen one pop up on your screen right now. We welcome your participation. To do so, simply select and submit your responses. The webinar is being recorded, and we are planning to disseminate slides from these presentations to all registrants of this webinar. We'll also notify you when the recording for this webinar is posted to SAMHSA's YouTube channel. We will provide a certificate of attendance at the end of today's event. We are not able to offer CEU credits, so this certificate is for your personal portfolio use only. We have arranged for ASL interpretation. Our interpreters today are Linda Eggy and Pam Orr. We also have live transcription through Zoom. In order to see live transcription, click Live Transcript CC and then select Show Subtitle. Just a quick look at our agenda today. We'll be momentarily moving to John Berg, who will provide some opening remarks. And then we're going to hear from our three presenters, Sean Clark, Catherine Andrade, and Brian Kurtz. And then following those presentations, we will have sufficient time to address the questions that you have for the team. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to John Berg, who is the Senior Public Health Advisor at the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment at SAMHSA, for his opening remarks. John.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. Okay. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Supporting Veterans in the Criminal Justice System. This is part 1, and it's focused on enhancing services in treatment court. Thank you for attending today's webinar. SAMHSA is pleased to provide this webinar that focuses on veterans treatment courts and other adult specialty courts that provide services to veterans. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with our longstanding Veterans Affairs expert and all-around great guy, Sean Clark, National Director for the Veterans Justice Programs at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and his VA colleagues, Catherine Andrade and Brian Kurtz, both VJO specialists. I would also like to thank all of those that are attending today that are veterans for your invaluable service and sacrifice to our great country, and to those that made it a priority today to attend to learn how to better serve our veterans through drug courts. Thank you so much. SAMHSA believes that veterans treatment courts are an important resource for communities to assist justice-involved veterans and divert them away from incarceration and into treatment. Veterans treatment courts connect these men and women to the benefits and treatment they have earned, saving their lives, families, and futures. SAMHSA also encourages all of our funded adult treatment drug courts, family treatment drug courts, and tribal healing to wellness drug courts to address the behavioral health needs of active duty military service members, returning veterans, and military families in designing and developing their programs, and to consider prioritizing this population for services where appropriate. This proactive approach is accomplished by effectively targeting and addressing veterans participants' clinical needs, including medical, behavioral health, and trauma. SAMHSA is supportive of veterans treatment courts and provides funding for them through discretionary grants and with training and technical assistance to the field through SAMHSA's Gain Center, through webinars like this and other resources. During today's webinar, our presenters will describe the various diversion opportunities and services that are available to veterans within the criminal justice system, and you will become familiar with VA resources that are available to support veterans. Again, I am pleased to have our partners from the VA share today, and I want to thank them for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. And as always, I also want to thank the Gain Center and their staff for their work in developing and facilitating today's webinar. So at this time, I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Stein.
Thank you, John. And now I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. Sean Clark serves as the National Director of Veterans Justice Programs in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA's Veterans Justice Programs include healthcare for reentry veterans, which provides outreach and linkage to VA services for veterans reentering communities after long-term incarceration in state and federal prisons. This also includes Veterans Justice Outreach, which serves veterans involved with agencies at the front end of the criminal justice system, such as police, courts, and jails. These programs are a prevention-oriented component of the VA's efforts to prevent and end homelessness among veterans, targeting the close relationship between incarceration and homelessness. Their mission also includes facilitating veterans' access to legal services by supporting a growing number of free legal clinics operating in VA facilities. Mr. Clark joined the VA in 2007 as a Presidential Management Fellow. He has also served as a Special Assistant United States Attorney in Washington, D.C. Mr. Clark earned his JD from William & Mary School of Law. Dr. Catherine Andrade is a Veterans Justice Outreach Specialist at Joseph Maxwell Cleveland Atlanta VA Medical Center. She has 26 years of experience working in the areas of health, mental health, and substance use, and specializes working with adults and seniors with mental health and substance use challenges, family issues, stress, adjusting to medical challenges, and military and veteran issues. Dr. Andrade previously served in the U.S. Air Force. And Brian Kurtz has worked for the Orlando Veteran Affairs Healthcare System for the past 13 years. Since 2014, he has worked as a Veteran Justice Outreach Specialist and became a regional trainer for the Strength at Home program in 2018. Prior to his employment with the VA, Brian worked in various settings, including a psychiatric hospital, an adolescent SUD treatment program, and in therapeutic foster care. Brian is also an adjunct instructor in the online MSW program at the University of Central Florida and graduated with his MSW from the University of Central Florida in 2001. He is originally from the Chicago area and is an avid Chicago sports fan. Brian is married and has 2 sons. So you've heard about who is going to be presenting to you today, and now let's take a look at who is joining us for these presentations. It looks like from the poll, about 50% of you are joining us from more urban areas, and a pretty even breakout between rural and suburban areas for the remainder of our attendees. We do have a couple of people joining from tribal lands such as reservations, pueblos, or Alaska Native villages. And then in terms of an agency or organization, we're seeing the largest proportion of you, about 24%, joining from corrections, probation, and parole. About 19% of you are joining from a community-based provider. Also have a good number of you joining from the judiciary, and then a handful, a good number joining from government and policy, about 22% joining from government and policy. So thanks so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us and to learn from our presenters. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Kurtz. I'm sorry, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Clark.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stein, very much. And John and our hosts at SAMHSA, very much appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you and everyone who's on. I appreciate your time and the interest in learning more about justice-involved veterans and the resources that are available to them, and hopefully how we can partner together to get them connected to those. So very much looking forward to this. I will start out with a quick overview or tour through how we're going to spend the next 90 minutes and what we're hoping to cover. Certainly want to give you an overview of what we know about veterans in the criminal justice system in some key areas. Also about the programs that VA uses to conduct outreach to veterans in those settings and to help them access VA services as early as possible, specifically the VJO program, Veterans Justice Outreach, which you may be familiar with. As you see, as we go down the list here, we broaden the lens a little bit and go from looking at our specific programs to VA as a whole, VA eligibility criteria, and the broader array of services that VA has to offer as a healthcare system and other forms of support. And then we'll conclude with how to access information about many of those resources, as well as us here in the National Program Office. So a lot of ground to cover, but very much looking forward to doing it with you all this afternoon. And we'll begin with what we know about veterans in the criminal justice system in a couple of key respects. The first question that we often get is whether, or an assumption rather, that we hear reflected in questions that we get often, is that veterans are overrepresented in criminal justice populations. And according to the best data we have, these come from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, our partners over at DOJ. The best data we have indicate that that's not the case, or I should say that's not the case anymore. That was true. As you look at the timeline here at the bottom of the graph, when BJS started looking and they started conducting these anonymous inmate surveys in the post-Vietnam era in the late 70s, it was the case that veterans were overrepresented in prison and jail populations relative to their share of the US adult population. That ratio flipped by the late 90s. And as you see, it is continuing to move in a positive direction, where veterans are now underrepresented in these correctional populations relative to their share of US adults overall. To give you a sense of scale, the absolute numbers here are still very large. 2011 and 2012, which is the most recent publication from BJS that covered both prison and jail populations, there were an estimated 181,000 veterans incarcerated across those two types of facilities in the US. So still a very large number of veterans in these settings, but again, thankfully not overrepresented. So here's some more detail from those BJS data. Once again, this is prison data only. This is BJS's most recent publication, but again, does not cover both prison and jail settings. The couple of key facts to note here. Combat status. This is another question that we often get. It's about 1 in 4 in the state system, 1 in 5 in federal. The service eras you see here broken out. I won't read all of this to you, but these are some good facts to be aware of about the incarcerated veteran population. Again, BJS has gathered this through their anonymous inmate surveys. The last bullet point I do want to dwell on, because that is very important for us. About 3/4 of these veterans in prison and jail settings report having a discharge status that would likely make them eligible for VA healthcare and for other VA benefits. So that would be an honorable discharge or a general discharge under honorable conditions. So I think historically an assumption that a lot of people held was, and prior to VA conducting really systematic outreach in criminal justice settings was that the population of veterans that we were going to find there wouldn't necessarily be able to take advantage of a lot of the services that VA had to offer, because I think the assumption was they would have gotten in trouble in the military. They would have gotten what's known as a bad paper discharge as a result of that, and as a result would be disqualified for VA healthcare and other benefits. That has not proved to be the case in our experience in the Veterans Justice Programs, and as you see here, also reflected here in the BJS survey data. For the most part, veterans who are in the criminal justice system are very likely going to be able to access VA healthcare and other VA benefits, having qualified for it on the basis of their discharge, as well as other criteria. So a little bit more about what we know about involvement in the criminal justice system and some of its collateral consequences. And I think given the nature of our audience and the work that you all do, none of this is going to be a complete revelation or totally new information, but I think it's important just to cover for completeness. Incarceration and homelessness are very tightly intertwined, and there is a very close nexus between these two phenomena, unfortunately. I will say that when I started this work, I felt it, I think it's very intuitive to draw a connection between long periods of incarceration. So serving for a felony conviction, decades in prison, emerging with family structures having changed or faded away, no longer having social ties of other kinds, your employment and housing situation obviously would have long ago evaporated. It stands to reason that someone would be at a heightened risk of homelessness coming out of a lengthy incarceration. What surprised me is the degree to which this doesn't take very long for someone's housing situation, their housing stability, and the foundations of that, their employment, their social supports to be eroded. That can happen even with very brief stays in jail, especially if those housing or social supports were a little bit precarious to begin with, which can often be the case. So the housing issue is a top of mind concern for us as we work with justice-involved veterans, and many of the veterans who we encounter in criminal justice outreach do have a history of homelessness. And of course, even if they haven't, the fact of their current justice involvement, whether that includes incarceration or not, places them at least potentially at risk for homelessness in the future. So obviously that's an outcome that we're looking to avoid. And fortunately, VA has services that can help address that very directly. Another, of course, ultimate negative outcome is suicide, and justice-involved veterans sit at the intersection of two populations that both independently face increased risk for suicide. Veterans as a population are at increased risk relative to the general population, and those who are involved with the criminal justice system are at elevated risk relative to the general population. And we're serving a group that sits in both categories. So as you see here, justice-involved veterans are 3 times more likely to have attempted suicide over the course of their lives compared to veterans who are not justice-involved. I think the very hopeful point on this slide is the second bullet, which is that we do see in the data a protective effect for veterans who are engaged with VA healthcare. Those rates are much lower for veterans who are engaged in VA care compared to those who are not. And so I think the size of the font and the boldness of it and really tell the story here at the bottom of the slide is that we urgently need and want partnerships with criminal justice agencies and communities across the country to make sure that we're able to find these veterans as they're passing through your jurisdiction's criminal justice system, and that we can help build a bridge to care for them, help them access the services that we know can prevent suicide, homelessness, and a long list of other negative outcomes. Talk a little bit more about the Veterans Justice Programs and how we do that work, how we reach this population in criminal justice settings. As mentioned earlier, there are 2. VJP consists of two distinct programs: Veterans Justice Outreach, which focuses on the front end of the criminal justice system, contacts with law enforcement, local jails, and courts, including veterans treatment courts, but not only VTCs. And Healthcare for Reentry Veterans, or HCRV, which is the program in which specialists conduct outreach to veterans in state and federal prisons and work on the transition following their release, ensuring they're connected with care and other services as they're coming back out and reintegrating into the community. What we find through that work is that this is a clinically complex population. As you see here, about 2/3 of the veterans who we see in these programs have a mental health diagnosis, and about half have a substance use disorder diagnosis. Just over 40% are dually diagnosed. And so, as you see, it's often the case that veterans who are engaging through outreach and criminal justice settings don't need one thing. They need services for more than one condition, and things can, again, it can be a clinically complex picture. But getting that right, making sure that they're able to access what they need and to access it timely is critical, because as you see here again, I don't think we can emphasize this enough, the consequences of getting it wrong can be very stark for this population. And we know that we're working with a group that has these increased risks for the direst possible outcomes. Again, we need and want partnerships and help in communities across the country. This is a very quick tour through our history, the development of the Veterans Justice Programs. I won't go through this point by point. I want to be conscious of time, but I think the main theme here is that this is work that has a long history in the VA. Our justice programs themselves launched formally in the mid-2000s with healthcare for reentry veterans and VJO both being established by 2009. But the history here goes back much farther. And at individual VA facilities, especially our vet centers, that have a long history of focusing on serving the incarcerated veteran population. This is work that was pioneered in that post-Vietnam era and has become more formal over time and is now continuing to grow. We have more than 420 specialists who are working full-time doing outreach in criminal justice settings for veterans across the country. I won't read our mission and vision statement to you verbatim, but I'll pull out three critical points. One is outreach. These are community-facing outreach programs. We need VJP specialists to be out in the world, out in the criminal justice system where veterans are, so that we can help connect with them, help them get access to our care as quickly as possible. Access is the other key word. Outreach isn't an end of itself, that it's all done with that end in mind, ensuring that we can get this linkage made for every veteran who is in need of clinical services that VA has available. And it's just a matter of helping them get from point A to point B in the cases where that can be structurally very difficult, incarceration being a prime example. The last critical keyword here is partnerships. I mentioned earlier that we depend on those, and that dependence is total. We are guests in every criminal justice setting that we do outreach in. VA doesn't have a right of access to a state or federal prison facility, to a judge's chambers for a treatment team meeting, for a veterans treatment court, or to a local jail. We are invited into all of these settings, and we have the ability to connect with our population as a result of these partnerships with criminal justice agencies and communities across the country. And so to say that we're grateful for that is an understatement. It's the beginning and the end of our ability to do this work and to serve this population. I will pause here for a second, and it's fitting that we're being hosted by SAMHSA for this. This is a resource that we can thank SAMHSA for, and that we use all the time to explain what our work looks like, where it happens. This is a veteran-specific adaptation of the sequential intercept model, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a basic intervention planning tool for the criminal justice system. But we use this to demonstrate the fact that VJP specialists operate at each of these intercepts. And this resource, which is developed by our partners at the National Institute of Corrections, with help, of course, from SAMHSA, and we had the opportunity to contribute as well. This is a resource that provides additional detail, the online version of this, I should say, additional detail about resources that are available for interventions that can be delivered at each one of these settings, as well as promising practices. So this is, I would commend this to you as something to take a closer look at if you are beginning to think about or to plan a veteran-specific intervention in your jurisdiction. This is a very useful tool for doing that and for helping get some examples of what that can look like. Every jurisdiction is different. We recognize that. We make sure to adapt our operations to the jurisdictions that we're working in, because that's the only way for them to be effective. But examples of what's been tried before are always helpful as well. So I will leave it there and hand over the mic to my colleague, Dr. Andrade.
Thank you, Sean. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you. So as you saw in previous slides, justice-involved veterans experience mental health to include PTSD and substance use issues at a significant rate. And because of those issues, active duty members who will ultimately become veterans sometimes have a difficult time adjusting to life after having served during wartime. So due to these issues, additional concerns may arise, such as unemployment, homelessness, and arrest. So many of these veterans that are arrested, their charges are directly related to their mental health and substance use issues. Now, for a long time, our justice system relied on punishment to change behavior, which has not worked. Accountability courts were established to provide those opportunities to our individuals that experience mental health and substance use issues to get the treatment that they need and to avoid jail time if they successfully complete the 18 to 24-month program. Veteran Treatment Courts is an accountability court that provides that alternative to incarceration. The primary objective of the Veterans Treatment Court is to promote public safety by providing an interagency, collaborative, non-adversarial treatment strategy to our veterans in the criminal justice system who suffer from mental health or substance abuse issues. These courts can be standalone courts or courts that are a part of a docket. An example would be a veteran docket under a mental health court. Veteran treatment courts, they use a hybrid integration of drug court and mental health court principles to serve military veterans and sometimes even active duty personnel. These courts offer treatment, again, mental health, substance use issues. The accountability aspect of it is to address the crime that occurred. And because they are judicially run programs, all are done in a structural manner while connecting them to benefits that they have earned. This is done by collaborating with the VA and other community programs or services. In VTC, veterans are surrounded by other veterans. They receive veteran-specific treatment and meet regularly with a veteran mentor, thus the opportunity to get their lives back on track. So the role of the Veterans Justice Outreach Specialist. As a VJO specialist, my role is to provide information, education to courts, attorneys, and other criminal justice partners, such as jail staff, local county police, sheriff departments, about veteran issues and the services that are available to them. We collaborate with judges and specialty courts, such as drug court or mental health court, to connect our veterans to VA treatment services and homeless programs. Most frequently, we do that through the Veterans Treatment Court. We also advocate on behalf of justice-involved veterans for appropriate treatment and serve as a liaison between the criminal justice system and the VA healthcare system. Access and link to veterans, and we assess and link veterans to treatment and report their compliance and progress to the court. But of course, we are unable to provide that information if we don't have consent from the veteran to be able to provide that information. Therefore, when we meet with the veteran to assess their needs, we obtain that consent. So when veterans become active participants in the VTC, a service that we provide is case management to those veterans. As I indicated earlier, we complete needs assessments to determine what their particular service needs are. So when we talk about linking to treatment, if a VTC participant has a substance use problem, myself, VJO, we will submit a referral to the substance use department within the VA. We attend court hearings and staffings, and that is where we provide the information about compliance, the progression throughout their treatment at the VA. Some courts completely rely on the VA to provide treatment, but you have some courts that have their own in-house treatment providers. Documenting, we document our direct clinical encounters with our veterans. And then case management sometimes can go beyond the court engagement, depending on the treatment needs and treatment team decision-making. Now, the one part about case management that we do not do is that we don't do anything that's forensic specific. So we don't do forensic assessment, and we don't testify in court. Things that we as VJOs cannot do. We cannot represent veterans in a court as a legal counsel. We are not attorneys. A great majority of us are social workers. So we have to be careful about giving legal advice. We cannot perform, again, forensic evaluations for the court. We cannot accept custody of veteran or their property. We cannot guarantee their program acceptance. That's the criminal justice side of the house. We can't write lengthy reports, court reports, or complete diversion paperwork. We also cannot document in their court systems. We cannot advocate for legislation that's above our pay grade. And we cannot decide criminal justice criteria for veteran court participants or decide who gains admission. Again, that's the criminal justice side of the house. We cannot provide ongoing care to VHA ineligible veterans after an eligibility determination has been made. Some courts will accept veterans who are not eligible for VHA services, veterans healthcare services. Could be a multitude of reasons. Majority of the reasons are they may not have served enough time, or it could be due to their discharge type. So how do we go about beginning the process of matching them up treatment-wise? We complete a needs assessment. We need to determine what their needs are as veterans. So if they have a substance use history, if they have medical needs, if they have a TBI, if we assessed and that's been indicated, we would make the appropriate referrals to the appropriate departments within the VA. VJOs, we work in collaboration with the court treatment providers as it relates to developing the initial treatment plan. Because each participant is required to complete a number of treatment hours to successfully complete the program. We have to take into account all aspects of the veteran. So when we are doing the needs assessment, it's not just mental health, substance use. We're looking at the veteran as a whole. We look at homelessness. We look at employment. We look at family issues to determine if those services are needed as well. And then there may be times where additional assessments may need to be administered. The court may do a risk assessment that's related to recidivism. VJOs, we do not do that. We can and only will do biopsychosocial or needs assessment. So how do we begin the eligibility process? So the medical centers, they must have a signed written authorization from the veteran before VJO can disclose any information at any point in the court proceedings. So it's best if we obtain that consent when a veteran has been identified as a potential candidate for the VTC. That gives us the ability to speak with attorneys, to speak with family members, and to also inform the court if they're even eligible for VHA services. All guests, to include peer mentors, if they are included in any of the discussions related to participants, they must sign a written authorization. The veteran must give written consent for them to be able to sit in on those meetings. Because the main part and the main point of this is that this is sensitive information that will be discussed. And so we have to make sure that the veteran is giving us permission to be able to discuss in a room full of individuals. The veteran has a right to revoke the release of information. However, there could potentially be consequences for that related to the court, because that's how they determine whether the veteran is being compliant with the treatment part of the program. There are guidelines for disclosing information pertinent to housing. So veterans have to give that permission. And then lastly, additional sensitive information, sensitive diagnosis, such as substance use disclosures. The veteran has to give permission for that. Medical information, such as HIV/AIDS, the veteran has to give permission for that. So we do have veterans that are not potentially eligible for veteran treatment courts. So there are some SAMHSA grantee funded treatment court programs that receives money from SAMHSA, and that helps assist those veterans who are not eligible, that are active participants in veterans treatment courts, to receive the services that they need. This money can be used for hiring therapists to provide necessary therapies, such as more recognition therapy. Some of these therapies are court-ordered therapies. And so you have to have someone who is trained and certified in those particular therapies. Some veterans may not have the monetary means to, get themselves to treatment appointments or their court hearings. And so some of the grant monies can be utilized to assist them with making the veterans' transportation needs being met. I'll give you a case example of a veteran in Seminole County Veterans Treatment Court that is a SAMHSA grantee funded treatment court. We have a veteran who has completed inpatient program twice in our domiciliary, our mental health treatment rehabilitation treatment program. Successfully completed those two programs, but then relapsed. Came back to the court and asked the court to graciously give him another chance so that he may be able to, try recovery again. And so the court agreed that he should be allowed to participate in inpatient therapy. And so they agreed to use SAMHSA granting funds to have him participate in inpatient, but outside of the VA substance use treatment. And so he completed that program. And once he completed the program, he asked if he could be a part of the IOP part of that program. The court agreed, and the SAMHSA grant funds provided him the necessary money to be able to be transported to and from that IOP treatment. And he is currently doing well, and has expressed his gratitude to the court because he's learned so much during his time at the DOM and in the community, and how he's incorporating all of what he's learned into his recovery plan. All right, so eligibility. Determining eligibility is done by completing a VA Form 1010-EZ. If they're in jail, of course, we have to take a hard copy for them to complete, but it is available online, and it can also be completed via the Eligibility Center. VA has a process where the veteran could potentially have apply for upgrade to their discharge, not DOD related, but the VA has a process. Also, they can seek assistance from veteran service organizations. These are organizations that assist veterans with applying for benefits, applying for service connection, housing certificates, education. And so if you know a veteran that is in need of services, please gear them in the direction of a veteran service organization. Another great program in reference to kind of transitioning from active duty to veteran is called the In Transition program. It's a free confidential program that offers the specialized coaching and assistance for active duty service members, National Guard members, reservists, veterans, and retirees who need access to mental health care. So relocating to another assignment, returning from deployment, transitioning from active duty to reserve or vice versa, preparing to leave military service, any other time they need it and need a provider for the first time. So the number is available on the slide, and I think you guys will have access to this slide after the webinar is complete. So how do we go about identifying the veterans in the criminal justice system? We know that veterans exist in the criminal justice system. We know that because research has shown that programs within the VA system and the criminal justice system have been established as a result of the research that veterans exist in the criminal justice population. VA has outreach programs. Sean talked about VJOs. We do jail visits. We do outreach with community providers. So how do we find them? Self-referrals. Veterans talk to each other. Even in jail, I have gotten plenty of referrals based on, or phone calls based on a veteran saying, another veteran in jail told me about this program. Family, friends, internal colleagues. You know, if a veteran is going to see his primary care and happens to mention his legal issues, that primary care will make a referral to the VJP program. Criminal justice partners, law enforcement, the jail staff, attorneys, public defenders, private attorneys, all can make referrals. Community partners. Sometimes veterans don't come to the VA. They go to local hospitals, emergency rooms, and they identify themselves as a veteran. And so you may have a discharged social worker that will attempt to contact the VA to find out what services are available to assist them. The VA also has a free web-based tool called the Veterans Reentry Search Service, VRSS. You will watch a short video about VRSS, followed by your next speaker, Sean Clark.
Every day in the field of criminal justice, you have the power to change lives. What if I told you there is a tool that can make your job easier while allowing you to change the lives of veterans? The Veterans Reentry Search Service, or VRSS, is an easy-to-use VA-supported tool that can strengthen partnerships between your facility and VA. It alerts VA staff to veterans in your population so they can provide them with important services that assist with their reentry.
As a veteran who has worked in the criminal justice system for 22 years, I've had the opportunity to use the Veterans Reentry Service and want to recommend it to all of my colleagues. It's extremely easy to use, and I have personally witnessed the good it can do for veterans.
No matter if you're serving in a correctional setting or the court system, VRSS is a free, encrypted, web-based portal that requires no downloads or special training. You simply drop a single file with your population's information into VRSS and it does the rest, supplying you with all the information you need to find veterans and help them connect with services that will help them plan for their reentry. At its core, VRSS is designed to make your job easier by giving you a better understanding of who you are working with and by allowing VA to target its outreach to veterans in your population and help your veterans access needed services. Make a difference in a veteran's life by using VRSS and connecting them with VA. Visit vrss.va.gov to help a veteran today.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and I hope that was that video was a helpful introduction to VRSS. And I'm going to talk briefly in a little bit more detail about what the system is and does. It was a 2-minute video. Obviously, it was intended to get the attention of our partners in criminal justice agencies and hopefully make them eager to learn more. But there's not much detail you can get across in 2 minutes. As the system as the video indicated, VRSS is an online tool that allows our partners, prison, jail, and court staff, to identify the veterans in their inmate or defendant population. The beauty of VRSS, and this is this bullet at the bottom of the slide, is that it also notifies VA staff who conduct outreach in that jurisdiction about who those veterans are, so that they're able to know who in a given criminal justice population may be eligible, may be able to access VA services. They can better focus their outreach. But very quickly, how this works, as the video hinted at but didn't fully explain, a user logs into VRSS and uploads a file. It's an Excel file, as the video said. There's no special software or anything exotic required to use the system. It works using Excel files as the submissions. With basic information that criminal justice agencies should have, name and date of birth and social, and a lot of the usual types of information in files that agencies maintain. After submitting that information, VRSS takes up to 2 hours to turn the results around, which sounds like a long time and is when you think about other search engines that you may be used to using. But the beauty of VRSS, and this is more relevant for our prison partners, is that it can handle files of very large sizes and can turn those results around in that 2-hour time frame as well. So whether it's a record with 10 individuals included in it, or a record with 130,000, which is the case when Bureau of Prisons uses VRSS, the turnaround time is about the same. How VRSS does this is by comparing the file that you as an external user submit against a VA-owned copy of DoD's master personnel database. And it is able to take those 2 pieces of information, compare and generate a match list that goes back to the external user and says, of the 10 individuals or the 100,000 individuals that you submitted, these are the folks who have a record of military service. And it also generates a results file at the same time that goes to the VA outreach specialist who works in that jurisdiction. There are a number of benefits to identifying veterans in criminal justice settings in this way. The advantages over self-report, the key one is thoroughness. and not relying on what can be differing interpretations of what the term veteran means, and whether someone identifies as a veteran or wishes to call attention to their military service, especially in correctional settings. The less that folks around you know about you, the better, and often that can be a real disincentive to sharing anything, including in intake interviews. So a records-based means of identification we see as a real improvement over self-report methods. And again, I think this slide says what I mentioned a moment ago, just in slightly different wording. We really see this as an important building block for our ability to find our population in the first place. It all begins there. All of this outreach planning begins with knowing who the individuals that we need to make contact with are, and then working with our partners to get those logistical arrangements made so that we can do that. And that's as true in a criminal court setting as it is in prison or jail. A little bit more background here about reasons for declining to self-report, but I want to highlight this case example here from our partners at California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR. They were, and credit to CDCR, they were one of the three very first users of VRSS when it was in its pilot phase. And we were still finalizing the development of it. And what the results that they found were pretty stark, as you'll see here. They had a self-reporting regime. They had been identifying veterans by asking at intake, asking in what we would consider the best way: did you serve in the U.S. military? Not, are you a veteran? It's been found that gets a better response rate. And they identified 2.7% of their inmate population had responded yes. Using VRSS, that jumped to 7.7%. And so given the size of that system's population, that's thousands of veterans who were in their custody and CDCR didn't know had served. And so that opens up a wide array of other benefits and services for those individuals, especially post-release. So that's maybe an outlier example given the size of CDCR, but I think it demonstrates the value of using a records-based identification tool, and VRSS we're hoping is certainly a free, and we're hoping an easily accessible and easy to use, easy to integrate into our partners' normal operational routines. A little bit more detail about what VRSS provides. In the interest of time, I want to be brief with this, and we are coming up on the link to the VRSS website. I would really encourage you to pay that a visit and to take a look. One of the resources that you'll find there is the full VRSS user guide, which is a voluminous document. I'll prepare you for that. It is very lengthy, but it has the answer to just about any question you can think of regarding VRSS, how the system works, what it provides back to you as an external user and to our outreach specialists as well. So rather than go through all this, I'll encourage you to visit the VRSS website, take a look at those resources. There's a link to the video there as well if you'd like to share that with any of your partners, colleagues in your jurisdiction or others that you're in contact with. We very much appreciate that. I'll say here, there is no MOU, there's no data use agreement that your agency would have to enter into with VA in order to use VRSS. What you'll see here on the front landing page of the website are the terms and conditions of use, and this spells out the commitments that VA is making about our adherence to federal data quality, privacy, and security standards. A lot of what you would find typically in an MOU. VA is posting up front and making those assurances to you as a VRSS user. So please take a look there. I hope that's useful. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague Brian to talk more about VA services that we can help get veterans connected to. Brian.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm going to talk now about some of the resources and services that the VA can provide to veterans. So leading into some of the types of treatment and services that the VA can provide, we're going to ask ourselves three questions. What types of services do VGO specialists typically connect justice-involved veterans to? How do VGO specialists determine which services a veteran needs, which relates back to the treatment matching assessments that Catherine spoke about earlier? And then why is it important to get veterans engaged in treatment as early as possible, which relates back to the sequential intercept model? We want to help intervene early on and minimize those consequences of them getting more deeply involved in the justice system. So I'm not going to read this entire slide, but just to highlight some of the different services that VA provides. VHA stands for Veterans Health Administration. So some of these services, inpatient hospital services, mental health, substance use treatment, our caregiver support program, whole health and housing solution for homeless veterans, and many more. This is not a comprehensive list. But VA is continuously adding programs to benefit a wide range of veterans and their families. I've been with the VA now for over 13 years, and it really does amaze me how many programs the VA has added since I started. And oftentimes I've found that most veterans aren't aware of everything that the VA can offer. So we really make sure to kind of continually educate them on these services and help connect them. Just quickly, one of the reasons I really enjoy doing jail outreach is to be able to sit down to kind of discuss with the veterans some of these services, some of these programs we can help link them to when they are released. And it really can, provide some hope in a situation where they're, likely not feeling much hope at all. I've had many instances to where I've been able to connect veterans to seeing a doctor for the first time in years, or I saw a veteran recently during a jail outreach visit who was just very excited that he could get a free pair of glasses, just eyeglasses every year. So sometimes it seems like little things to us, but again, it's all about kind of instilling that hope for when they are released. One of the services the VA offers is peer specialist services. The VA, and I just obtained this number last week, so I think it's pretty up to date, employs a total of 1,369 peer support specialists across the country. And this number continues to steadily increase. So peer specialists have lived experience and can share their stories with others. Post-incarceration engagement peers are veterans who can share their recovery stories and have firsthand knowledge of VA programs. So we have many of these types of peers working in our veterans justice programs. The number I just mentioned, that is total peer support specialists. So they don't, peers don't just work in veterans justice programs, but like I said, we have multiple peers working in our programs. They're there to support and help the veteran build their own skills to reach their goals, veteran to veteran. We hear that very often and work with our peers. It's a veteran to veteran in a non-judgmental way. The relationship's not clinical like that of a doctor-patient, but more that veteran to veteran. And due to these lived experiences, peers can engage the veteran in many different recovery-oriented activities. So as I mentioned, we have many peers working in our Justice Involved programs. We work very collaboratively with them. They really can assist the veterans in navigating complicated systems. They can provide that social emotional support pre-release and continue to support the veterans post-release. Our peer specialist here in Orlando, he's amazing. He runs a peer recovery group in some of our local jails, and we have a fair amount of veterans that when they are released, they follow up with him because of that group, because of that connection they built, and they trust him and feel comfortable reaching out to him when they are released. So like I said, just a very valuable member of our team. Peers are, I feel like, constantly linking vets to the various physical and behavioral health services the VA offers. They're great at assisting and navigating VA healthcare, role modeling calls to make, advocating, assistance with help determining transportation needs and resources. I mean, the VA is an extensive system, and sometimes it just can be a little bit difficult to navigate. And peers really help as a guide to help guide the veteran through this process. So, just a couple examples again with our peer specialist here in Orlando. We had a veteran recently who was nervous to see a psychiatrist for the first time. So our peer sat with him in the waiting room, kind of talked to him about what to expect. After the appointment, he brought him over to the pharmacy, picked up his medications, showed him how to order refills. So just such a helpful service. He's also assisted in transporting a veteran from jail to our DOM, our residential program. And he was very open with, he was a former graduate of the DUM years ago. So during that car ride, it was so key that he was able to ease some of the veterans' anxiety, kind of talk to the veteran about what to expect. Again, invaluable member of our team. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our legal services for veterans programs, specifically the medical legal partnership. I'm not going to read this entire slide, but just some highlights. The medical legal partner, MLPs, focus on collaboration between VA staff and legal service providers. The legal service provider and VA team, they're co-located at a VA facility delivering legal services. So the legal service providers train us VA staff on available legal services and how to best identify legal concerns, and then we train them on existing VA resources. So it's a truly a strong partnership. In Orlando, we have our legal service provider come twice a month to one location and once a month to another, with numerous veterans who attend these clinics. So some of the different services that are offered at these legal clinics: housing concerns, eviction, foreclosure, landlord-tenant issues, family law, child support, custody, divorce. I see a lot of veterans in jail that have issues with child support. So these have been great resources to be able to refer them to for assistance. Driver's license revocation, advocacy to gain access to healthcare specific treatment, consumer law, debt collection, bankruptcy, fraud, or identity theft. So, many times the veterans we work with, they have legal issues along with their criminal legal charges. So again, very beneficial resource and partnership. So if you're gonna get a copy of these slides, I believe. So here is a link to go to for more information about the Legal Service for Veterans programs. And for a listing of all the VA medical legal partnerships, the second website on there can take you right to that. And then if you have any questions, I included the email on there as well. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about trauma-informed care and then highlight the Strength at Home program with the VA, which is a trauma-informed program. Most of us have heard the term trauma-informed care. But I did put on here the link to SAMHSA's manual, which is SAMHSA's concept of trauma and guidance for a trauma-informed approach. If you go to this link, it is a free download, very beneficial guide, defines trauma and trauma-informed approach, and offers 6 key principles. So the Strength at Home program. So obviously at the VA, we work with a lot of veterans with significant histories of trauma. And one of the treatment offerings we can offer is the Strength at Home program. Strength at Home is an evidence-based trauma-informed group treatment program that is offered at most VA medical centers across the country. It was developed to address the veteran service members who use violence and aggression in intimate relationships. It's a 12-week therapeutic group intervention with follow-up. We're using motivational interviewing to enhance the change process. It also pulls from cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive processing therapy. So the ultimate goal of the intervention is to end intimate partner violence in current relationships and try to prevent it in future relationships. Some of the skills that the participants are taught: developing effective conflict resolution, enhancing intimacy and closeness, and reduce the negative effects of stress on their relationships. So some additional highlights. Veterans or active duty service members who have engaged in recent IPV. These are closed groups, 12 weekly 2-hour sessions. So that is 24 hours of group therapy. With the intake assessment, with the post-treatment assessments, and a lot of case management in between with some of them, it really totals about 26 hours. There have been different jurisdictions that they have been able to, that wanted a 26-week program, and we've been able to tailor the intervention to last longer. And so there's 5 to 8 veterans per group. There's never more than 8. A male and female co-therapist is preferred. This isn't always attainable, but this is the goal. There is, however, always 2 therapists. The intervention will never be delivered with just 1 therapist. And several veterans treatment court judges have approved Strength at Home in my area as an alternative to state mandated IPV courses, because it's the only program demonstrated through clinical trials for veterans to reduce aggression in relationships. So if you would like to know if your closest VA offers Strength at Home, please reach out to your VJO specialist. Strength at Home is actually also now being offered in the community, and non-VA clinicians are being trained. Dr. Casey Taff is one of the developers of the program, and he is doing these trainings in the community. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I can put you into contact with him to find out when the next training is. He recently did one, so I believe his next one will probably be September, October, but I can find that out for you. Okay, and starting to close out our presentation, we'll look at 2 outcomes from recent research. So within 1 year of their VJO outreach visit, 92% of veterans with mental health diagnoses had at least 1 VA mental health visit, averaging 13 visits that year. Within the same time frame, 66% of VJO veterans with substance use disorder diagnoses had at least 1 VA substance use disorder visit, averaging 12 visits that year. So as expected, it can be a little more difficult to engage veterans with substance use disorders and treatment compared to veterans with mental health problems. So our goal is to continue to improve on these numbers, as we know that once we connect veterans to treatment, they can start to get better and hopefully minimize future interactions with the justice system. Very helpful links here, very user-friendly website to find your closest VJO specialist, as well as your HCRV specialist. Wanted to just quickly touch on some additional resources. Most people have heard of our Veterans Crisis Line. The number, shortened now to 988 press 1. Our National Call Center for Homeless Veterans. I provide these 2 numbers to every veteran I see during jail outreach. Sometimes they are released from jail in the middle of the night and they have nowhere to go. Well, the nice thing is both of these hotlines available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's always someone to talk to. Then the call gets routed to the closest VA medical center or the one the veteran is enrolled in. And lastly on this slide, you can find different VA locations, and also there is also a link for the Veterans Benefits Administration. You can find your closest regional office or offices to where you can refer veterans to help them file disability claims. Okay, and then that is our Veterans Justice Programs National Leadership Team. Okay, thank you. I'll hand it back to Melissa.
All right, thank you so much. And now we have some time to answer your questions. So if you have a question, please enter that into the Q&A pod, and you can find the icon for that at the bottom of the screen. So we've gotten a few questions. So Ashley Sabatino has been dropping in the chat some links for locating your nearest VJO, for locating your nearest HCRV specialist. So Julie Perkins asked, what if defining the VJO nearest you isn't correct? So who might folks reach out to get more updated information about their VJO, or to provide updated information about a VJO? And so Sean or Brian, whichever.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. If anybody has a question about the listing, feel free to contact me, and we'll if that website is out of date, we do our best to keep up with it. But there is turnover that can take us a little bit of turnaround time to hear about. So we'd appreciate hearing about that if somebody's moved on and we haven't heard about that through the usual channels yet. Feel free to reach out directly.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Okay, and so that answers one of the questions, and so some of the other questions were about finding that VJO, so it's through that link that Ashley put into the chat. So we had someone ask about becoming a VJO peer support specialist. So she said, or this person said, I live in Houston and am a MHPS specialist. How can I go about becoming a VJO peer support specialist? I've helped the Public Defender's Office in Houston with several veterans to connect to services and assistance. So any suggestions for folks in the audience? Sean, I see you nodding your head, so we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so glad to hear. Thank you. I appreciate the interest. And we are looking forward to adding more peer specialists in the very near future. All of those vacancies are going to be advertised on the USA Jobs website. So I think the first thing to say is keep an eye out there. And you can tailor that search, of course, by geography. If you're specifically focused in one area, you can narrow that to as much as you'd like. But all of those positions will be filled through USA Jobs. I'd also encourage you to reach out to using the website that we've mentioned several times to reach out to the VJP staff working there in Houston now to find out anything that they could share about sort of the state of the program and just to begin to get a feel for what the work is like there and where it's heading. But I encourage you to start building that bridge. But specifically for the vacancy, of course, keep an eye on USA Jobs and go that route. We have to do all of our recruiting, or I should say the medical centers where the positions are located have to do all their recruiting through USA Jobs.
I think along those lines, and this might be kind of bridging beyond the scope of this webinar, but I'm going to pitch it to you anyways. If you want to respond to it, someone asked, what recruitment efforts is the VA taking to increase the behavioral health workforce? And peer support specialists being a kind of an example of some of the needs that exist. So, are there any other thoughts you'd like to share regarding what the VA is doing to increase the focus on behavioral health workforce and providing support?
Unfortunately, I couldn't share specifics too much for what our mental health colleagues are doing along those lines, beyond saying that I know that is the focus of a major effort at the department level and has been for some time. So I'd say that's definitely a high priority target for the department, just unfortunately not one that I'm able to shed a lot of light on in any kind of detailed way because we're not directly involved with it. So I apologize, but it's one I can't quite stretch to.
I think it's a question we all have. So yeah, thank you for responding to that. And then we also got a question about the VRSS system because so many jails are using so many different kinds of information systems. And so there's a question about integration. So is it possible to integrate the VRSS with other platforms or systems that jails might be using, or do they need to manually enter data for every veteran?
Well, so what has to come, that's a great question. And we have heard some creative solutions to this. So the VRSS system itself, we can't customize to a particular user, but the beauty of it is that its requirements are very simple. All that needs to come in is an Excel spreadsheet with certain required types of information. How a user gets there, it makes no difference to VRSS. We have no idea how the file got generated. So some really promising examples that we've heard from jurisdictions have involved using their IT staff or the contractors who run their IT operations for them to write a program to automatically extract the information from whatever its native source is in their system and generate that Excel file formatted in the right way with all the required information so that every morning when the employee whose job it is to upload the file on a regular basis to VRSS, every morning when they log in, the file's just sitting there. And all they have to do is log in, drop it. Takes about 2 minutes to do it that way. I'm told, and again, I don't have the IT expertise to speak to the specifics of this, but I'm told that was not a heavy lift for at least a couple of the jurisdictions that set it up that way. Once the IT folks got a hold of it, they said, oh, this is a program to build an Excel spreadsheet. Yes, this is doable. So again, may or may not be possible in any particular jurisdiction, but that is an approach that we've heard some of our users have some good success with, and reduce some of the burden and I think some of the anxiety around having to extract information on a manual basis. It's something that a program can do in a relatively simple way.
Thank you for that. That's a great idea. So we do have just a couple of questions about maybe more of the wondering how common it is to see this work across the country. So one person asked, how common is it for jails and prisons to ask the question at intake about previous military service? And so from our work at the Gain Center, it is becoming increasingly more common, and VRSS has certainly made it much more standardized and a more common practice. But anything else that you all want to talk about related to encouraging jails and prisons to ask this question and how they can do that more effectively to ensure veterans are identified?
Well, sure. And thank you. I'd say we don't have a study on this to point to, but I'd say that's been our anecdotal experience as well. And what we hear from specialists is that as time has gone on, it has become much more common as awareness of veterans as a population of special interest in criminal justice settings continues to grow. And I think that this comes from a number of different sectors. The popularity and the growth of veterans treatment courts has really influenced, that has gotten a lot of publicity in a lot of communities, and well deservedly so. And that's, I think, has influenced jails and prisons possibly that didn't have a practice like this in place to start to become more aware of this population and its needs and to start asking the question. The guidance that I would have is that for whatever reason, if VRSS, I'd say if it's at all possible, let's start there. Because that's I think the most thorough means that we can point to of getting those identifications made. If for whatever reason that's not possible, or it's not possible right away in a given jurisdiction, the thing that I would emphasize is language and word choice, and asking the question in the most inclusive potential way. The best version that we've run across is, did you serve in the U.S. military? And for a little extra inclusivity, did you serve in the U.S. military, including the Guard or Reserves? Just to try and rule out any reason that folks might self-select out when we really do want them to be raising their hand if they've had any kind of contact. We can, this is not an eligibility determination, all that will come later. We just, in the very first instance, if someone has spent any amount of time in the service, that's the question that we want answered there at the outset, and it gives us something to follow up on. So I'd encourage asking the question in that way. And again, in talking about VRSS and records-based identification, that's not to, to run down the need for or the value of self-report-based means of identification. Asking is vastly better than not asking and not knowing who's there. Again, we still see a gap between that and records-based methods with folks who wouldn't self-disclose for whatever reason. But again, that is not a reason not to ask if the alternative is, again, to be unaware of who the veterans are in a given population. So it's important to start, and then we can, it gives us a place to build from.
Thank you for that. And Brian and Catherine, is there anything else you want to add in terms of the work that you do there at the front line in terms of identifying people and getting people linked to care?
I would say the two jails that I work in, they do a great job at asking, but I still get a fair amount of referrals from maybe when the veteran's been there for a while and has spoke to a mental health counselor at the jail. I've even, when I've gone to do jail outreach, I've had meeting with one veteran tell me about another veteran on their pod. So I still do get a fair amount of referrals and I'm sure they get asked the question when they're booked and they say no. For one of the, many of the reasons that Sean mentioned. But so I actually, the two jails that I work with are one of them is about to sign up for VRSS because of when I showed them that statistic from the California Department of Corrections, and it is very eye-opening. So in my other jail, we're working on it. But so yes, I don't know, Catherine, if you have anything to add.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I work in the Atlanta catchment area, and we have a kind of a mass catchment area. And so we have like 17 active veteran treatment courts and 45 jails. And so we have established with each one of our jails, as best we can, that their intake paperwork, that they place the question of, have you ever served in the military, on their intake paperwork. So that helps a lot with identifying those particular veterans. Some of the jails keep a list of veterans that come into their jail system and will send that list through to the coordinator through the VTCs. And so one of my counties does that very well. And so we get a list of veterans that have been in their jail system each month. And so that's how we are able to identify a significant amount of our veterans.
Thank you for that. And another strategy that I just recently was chatting with the Department of Corrections about was that they have veteran pins that they give to their staff who have a history of service in the military, and just wearing that pin would also then sometimes spark a conversation with an incarcerated individual who could then say, I also served, and then they could have a conversation. It kind of opens the door to some more support and services through that conversation. So some great ideas. Let's see, I'm just going to look back. So someone asked, talking about more of the VJA role, how can we get buy-in from the local VJO to collaborate with specialty courts and to foster willingness to participate and attend specialty court hearings and staffings, considering there are time constraints on their workload? So Catherine, could we start with you and then we'll turn to Brian?
Yes, the time constraints is a big factor. And as I indicated previously, we have a large catchment area. And so manning can be an issue with that as well. Manning being the number of VJOs that a medical center has. And so with that large catchment area, it can be difficult to put much emphasis in the other courts. But one of my courts, what they have decided to do actually recently is any veteran that has been identified within like the drug court or the mental health court, they will identify to present that information to the VJO. And then the VJO can then provide some minimal case management services. So minimal case management service, meaning that they could do the assessment, the needs assessment, and then refer the veteran on to the services that they need. And if there are additional services, then those providers that they are connected to in the VA can then make the referrals there through that process. So it doesn't, it gives us the eye on the veteran, and we're able to, provide that service, that initial service that's needed, that gets them into the system and gets them the services that they need.
I would just briefly add too that if you're having difficulty getting buy-in from your local VJO, our national leadership team, one of the last slides that I included on there, is very receptive, always want to help. So I would suggest reaching out to our national team for some additional assistance. Wanted to add that.
Sean, anything you would add to this discussion?
Well, just that I would second the point about capacity, and that's that is always a limiting factor. We're expecting to grow the program significantly over the coming year. But even so, there will, with over 3,000 specialty courts across the country, we're not going to be in a position to staff every one of those. So our focus, of course, is veterans treatment courts. I think that, and happy to engage and to help brainstorm where that's helpful about an issue in a particular jurisdiction. So I'd second what Brian said, but we have heard some good examples from different parts of the country and coming up with some creative solutions. And Catherine mentioned one just recently, but there can be different versions of that help ensure that veterans get identified in different settings and are able to get connected to care, even if that's not able to look like the way that a specialist would staff a veterans treatment court, being in court every session, working with the court in that way. There are other ways to help ensure that there's a pathway into treatment for veterans from other settings as well. And again, happy to support specialists working with their partners to come up with locally appropriate solutions to do that.
Thank you for that. And we're getting close to time, so maybe just one more question. And I think this person is looking for more guidance on how to connect with VRSS. And so it sounds like this person has access to all of the information about people in their local jail. So this person asks, can I put their name in VRSS and will it identify them as serving? So I think this person needs just maybe a high level overview of what it is to link to VRSS, what might be some first steps to doing that as a jail facility.
Sure. Well, sure. Well, so the great question, glad to field that one always. And the first step is to create an account. By going to the link that we had earlier in the presentation, when you click through, past that landing page that includes the terms and conditions of using the site, there is the opportunity to create an account. You'll be doing that as a court facility, a correctional facility, or a court system user. You pick the type that applies to you and put in some basic information about you and your institution. Your account will be approved usually within 24 hours. That's typically a very quick turnaround process. That is, like I say, intended to be a low barrier kind of process. There's no MOU or data security agreement that you need to sign. It's just inputting that basic information to identify you and your jurisdiction. That will set you up to use the system. And again, the user guide contains the full details about how to build the file that gets submitted. So how you take that information you've got now, get it into the right format for VRSS to accept it, and how to complete the submission process for that. The nice thing about the user guide, like I mentioned, it's a little bit daunting because it's over 100 pages, but it is searchable and it does have screenshots for every stage of the process. So it really is a pretty close walkthrough of the process from end to end.
Thank you. And I said that was the last question, but one last question, because I feel like this might be really helpful for the group. This person said, my jail has been resistant to VRSS because it requires using the social security numbers. So how do you respond to concerns about confidentiality, et cetera?
Well, sure. So the system, I would, again, the terms and conditions makes clear, sort of the protocols that VA is adhering to in operating VRSS. It is an encrypted website, so from that security angle, it is secured. But that said, we recognize that different jurisdictions have different authority in this area, and we have heard from users who've been interested in using the system, but once they've looked into it, they've determined that they're not able to share the information that VRSS requires. We can't overrule that. That's unfortunate, but that is the fact of the matter. And of course, our partners have to listen to the counsel they get from their legal department. We wouldn't attempt to second guess or to override that. So there is no overarching federal legislation to point to that mandates the use of VRSS or that would overcome that potentially. So if that is the answer that you get in your jurisdiction, again, I think that highlights the importance of asking the question using the best and most inclusive possible language. But again, we recognize that some jurisdictions will end up with a hard barrier by virtue of their operating authority and not be able to use the system. Many do, and we're grateful for that, but also equally value the partnerships with jurisdictions that can't, that look into it and it turns out they can't.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're at the end of our time. I think Ashley has paused the chat so that you all can access the certificate of attendance. So go look at the chat. You'll see a PDF that you can, it's an icon for a PDF that you can click on and download directly to your computer. So the chat is not disabled for someone listening. So just look up its post through from Ashley Sabatino. We can go to the next slide, please. There it is. Just a picture of the certificate of attendance. And again, Ashley has put it in the chat and you can email her directly if you have trouble finding it. I want to say thank you so much to our presenters, to Sean, Brian, and Catherine for their time and sharing their expertise today. Thank you so much. This has been extremely informative and helpful to the groups, and I see some emoticons floating up. So I think our audience agrees. We do have a poll that just popped up. If you would like to give the Game Center more feedback. Move to the next slide. And just a reminder, this is part 1 of a series of webinars. So part 2 is scheduled for August 22nd. And you can click on the link, or actually you can't click on that one. Once we share the slides, you can click on the link and sign up to join this follow-up. And this webinar will be more specific to responding to co-occurring PTSD and substance use disorder needs. So a little bit of deeper dive into some of the challenges faced by our veterans. So we're looking forward to that. Next slide, please. And then if you haven't signed up for the Game Center's listserv, we have this QR code that you can use, or this shortened URL link that you can enter into your favorite browser, and it'll take you directly to the web page to sign up for our newsletter. And then I think Ashley will drop that certificate into the chat one more time before we close out. But if you have any questions, or if there are concerns that we did not sufficiently address or didn't get to because of time limitations, feel free to reach out to us at the Game Center. At the bottom of this screen, we have the Game Center's website, as well as a direct toll-free number. We welcome you to reach out to us with any questions you may have. We're happy to provide information as best we can. So once again, Ashley dropped the certificate of attendance in the chat, so you can chat on that, click on that, download it, and thank you all so much for your time and joining us today. Looking forward to part 2 on August 22nd. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.